Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Morning Devo with Beau. Beaulette's my name, hence Beau. Oh, yes. Hope you guys are well. It is May 4th, and we're going to be launching in today on the devotion in two chapters, Genesis 8 and 9. So these morning devotions are really me just going through the Bible. Again, I grew up very progressive, very secular, not around the Bible. And so I didn't start reading the Bible till later on in my kind of latter teenage years. And really was influenced by a lot of music, Metallica, Iron Maiden, reggae music, Peter Tosh, Steel Pulse, and a lot of it had to do with these ideas of heaven and hell and right and wrong and good and evil and I never really understood kind of where that came from or some of the language. Like if you listen to Metallica's first album, you'll hear a song called Four Horsemen. I never knew what Four Horsemen was. If you listen to Metallica's second album, right, Creeping Death, there's a song, Creeping Death. I never knew who Pharaoh was, or I never read the book of Exodus. So it was kind of cool to be able to pick up a Bible and start reading, and I just fell in love with the Bible and the God of the Bible and the redemption that is constantly a theme of the biblical texts. All the way from even early on in our early readings of the Bible, we see that there is a redeeming that is taking place of humanity. That the human condition is one that is warped in many ways. Just like when you have a ball that is warped. Have you ever played basketball and you've kind of bounced the ball? And it's lopsided, and when you have a lopsided ball, it's kind of tough, right? Because the ball, you think it's going to bounce up, but it really bounces to the right. Or you think it's going to bounce up straight and it bounces to the left. Or it can go up, forward, and back. You never know. It's very unpredictable if you have a lopsided ball and you're playing with it. And that's what's kind of the human condition is like. It's one of just being lopsided. We constantly think, we assume we're going to do the right things, but we tend to boom, we bounce that way or bounce this way. And you might think someone's solid, but that person who you think is solid is not so solid. Even they are a little warped. And when you get to know anybody on the planet, it's really true. If you get to know anybody on the planet, you're going to find that everybody is the same. It's crazy. Everybody is somewhat warped. Everybody's a little lopsided. Some people's one side's a little more than the other, but we all are lopsided somewhat. And yet the God of the Bible is, in a sense, making a way, making a way to redeem so that there can be this fellowship between human beings and their creator, God. Okay, so let's get into chapter 8 and chapter 9 and see what those have to say to us today. So welcome, everybody. Glad you're with me this week, and let's do it. Okay, 8 and 9. It says, "But God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and livestock with him in the boat." I kind of always underline that idea of God remembered, right? They always, in the book of Genesis, you always have this kind of very human way of talking about God. There's a big highfalutin word for that, by the way, but it's attributing human actions with the deity. And so it's like God remembers. Like God really, does God really need to remember? But it's the idea, God, his mind is on Noah. And it's neat because it means that God has a mind, and also God is compassionate, and God can look at you in a sense of be involved in our lives, which is really an amazing concept that I find fascinating in the early parts of the Bible. Why do I find it fascinating? Because I wasn't raised this way. I was raised that even if there was a deity, so to speak, he wasn't personal. He didn't have a personhood. He wasn't involved at all in our lives. He just kind of energy, like energy. Energy don't care. Energy is just energy. And that's kind of how I thought. But this God of the Bible remembers. Do you remember? Can you remember? What does it mean when you remember something? When you remember somebody? Doesn't it mean investment? When you remember your kids and you remember their birthday, why is it that you remember their birthday and not other people's? Why do you not know the neighbor down the road's birthday? Well, it's because you're not invested with the neighbor down the road like you are with your kids. That's why we know our kid's birthday. There's an investment. God remembers Noah. It's kind of a cool concept, I think. I think it's pretty awesome. And it says, he sent a wind to blow across the earth, and the floodwaters began to recede. The underground waters stopped flowing, and the torrential rains from the sky were stopped. So you really get the idea that this flood was both ways, up and down. Water was coming up, and water was coming down. And it says, so the floodwaters gradually receded from the earth. After 150 days, exactly 5 months from the time of the flood that the flood began, the boat came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Man, we should take a trip to Ararat and go do a hike. Have you ever watched those documentaries on this? It's really fascinating. I find it very, very interesting. Mount Ararat. And notice it's a real mountain. It's not some, the hill Cumorah, the whatever it is, the Kolob, the whatever, made up. No, this is a real place. And then it says, let's see, and then 2.5 months later, as the waters continue to go down, other mountain peaks became visible. Now another 40 days, Noah opened the window he had made in the boat and released a raven. The bird flew back and forth until the floodwaters of the earth had dried up. And he also released a dove to see if the water had receded and it could find dry ground. But the dove could find no place to land because the waters still covered the ground, so it returned to the boat. And Noah held out his hand and drew the dove back inside. After waiting another 7 days, Noah released the dove again. This time the dove returned to him in the evening with a fresh olive leaf in his beak. Then Noah knew that the flood waters were almost gone. He waited another 7 days and then released the dove again, and this time it did not come back. By the way, you can always again go to Answers in Genesis and check out some of their really detailed articles on these scriptures. It says, Noah was now 601 years old, and on the first day of the new year, 10.5 months after the flood began, the floodwaters had almost dried up from the earth. Noah lifted back the covering of the boat and saw that the surface of the ground was drying. 2 months went by, another 2 months, and the earth was dry. That's a long time, man, to wait, right, for some dry ground to take place. And then it says, then God said to Noah, leave the boat, all of you and your wife and your sons and their wives, and release all the animals and the birds and the livestock and the small animals that scurry along the ground, so they can be fruitful and multiply throughout the earth. So Noah, his wife, and his sons and their wives left the boat, and all of the large and small animals and birds came out of the boat, pair by pair. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and there he sacrificed as burnt offerings the animals and birds that had been approved for that purpose. So really interesting. This is the first mention of burnt offerings, which is a really interesting offering of dedication that we see in the law of Moses. A little later on from the time of Moses, we will see kind of a breakdown of the various offerings that are to be made to God. And Noah seems to already have this kind of understanding. Now remember, people have already been living a long time on the planet as well. So this is something definitely was known, and Noah seemed to have practiced this. And so he offers a burnt offering or a dedication offering unto God. And it says, and the Lord was pleased with the aroma of the sacrifice and said to himself. So this is something that God seems to be very well pleased with, is our real devotion of worship unto him. So it really, kind of makes me think of a question in the morning, right? Is what is my devotion to God? What is my worship to God like? Now, for those of us that have read the New Testament, we might jump to a passage like Romans chapter 12 that talks about present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto the Lord. Meaning the Christian's life is one of a life that is a living sacrifice. It's not a dead sacrifice, but God is well pleased with our lives living unto him. In a sense, a burnt offering, a dedicated offering of our lives that goes up to the Lord. Is my life dedicated to God? Is it dedicated to the true and living God? Is my life dedicated to knowing the truth of God? What is my life really dedicated to? Am I dedicated to my guitar? Am I dedicated to the things I like to do? How dedicated are people to their hobbies? They really are into it, right? They get into the intricacies of it. They kind of follow maybe the sport or the hobby or whatever it is. And they kind of know everything about it or a lot of things about it. And they really want to develop an expertise in those subjects. Well, is my dedication to God like that? Am I really dedicated to God? Do I really want to get to know the truth of the Bible? Not your organization. I don't want to know the Watchtower organization. I don't want to know, your prophets on the planet. I don't want to get to know, I don't want to know them through them. I want to know, am I dedicated to the Word? Am I personally, Noah was a guy who was dedicated. He wanted to do it. It was his offering unto the Lord. What can I offer the Lord? What can I give to the Lord, man? I want to give my life. But how do I show that I'm going to give my life? How do I really give my life? When I say give my life, how do I give my life? I got to lay down my life. If I'm going to give my life to somebody, if I'm going to say to somebody, I'm going to give my life for you, what does that mean? Does that mean drain the blood? It could be, right? It could be that I'm going to give you some of my blood. I'm going to give you my life. And my life is in my blood. It might be, hey, you know what? You need a transplant. And I'm going to give you my life, man. I'm going to give you one of my organs. Maybe that's what it's going to be. I might say, hey, I'm going to give you my life. And that means I'm going to give you everything that I got. I'm going to give you my dedication. Even though you might be a mess, you might not be like a guy worthy of my dedication, but I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to give you my all. I'm going to give you everything I can give you. We can't, when we say to someone, even like a spouse, when we say or to our kids, I'm going to give you my life, we don't mean actually I'm going to literally drain all the blood out of my life and give it to you, and I'll just be dead on the ground because I gave you all my life, right? It's not going to be like that, but it's the idea is I'm going to give you everything I can. I'm going to even bring me to the brink of exhaustion, for you, whatever it is. I'm going to lay down whatever hobbies, my desires and wishes and wants, and maybe I got to lay those down for you. I'm going to give you my life. I'm going to give you my dedication. And people do that all the time. They're laying down their life for their job. They're laying down their life for their family, right? They're giving everything. And if they could give themselves in the sense of all their blood and still be alive, kind of like Dracula, they would, right? Moms would give everything to have their kids, survive and thrive and things like that. Interesting. And what does Noah do? How can I show that I want to give my life? He literally gives God life. He gives an animal over. He drains it of its life as a picture of Noah needing to draw close to God, needing to show that I want to give you my life. I can't drain my body's blood, but I'm going to drain this animal's blood. And because I need to give you everything. It's really a radical picture, this idea of sacrifice and offerings. And of course, the word offering in Hebrew means what? To bring near. You don't just offer to offers like, it's just a ceremony, but it's an offering to draw near, right? When you're dedicating your life to someone, hey, I'm going to dedicate, my life to you. What I'm saying is that I'm invested in getting to know you and giving you my all. There's that investment there. There's that drawing close to that person. That's what I mean by investment. It's the drawing close. Am I dedicated to God? Well, you can see how dedicated you are if you're drawing close or not. That's kind of cool. Am I drawing close? Am I really dedicated? God was pleased. He said, never again will I curse the ground because of the human race, even though everything they think or imagine is bent towards evil from childhood. I remember a rave back in Los Angeles in 91 or 92. It was called Bent, B-E-N-T. And I love it. Everything, you guys are bent, man. Everything you guys think about, everything you imagine, it's all bent towards evil from childhood. It always is going the wrong direction. We're always going the wrong direction. You think we're in the right direction. You think that where we live, how we build houses, everything is good. We think that's all good. And we don't realize that it's all a bending of the good. We all bent. Man, that's crazy. I would imagine when we get to the Lord is going to blow your brain and my brain by just how fallen we really are. Because we somehow think we're kind of good and we kind of got it together. And boy, if we just get the right team in there, they're going to, everything's going to get fixed. And boy, gas prices will go down. By the way, they are quite high right now. And if you're traveling, boy, right? Not a good time to travel. That's for sure. And it says, I will never again destroy all living things. As long as the earth remains, there will be a planting, harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night. Okay, so there's a promise from God. It's neat that God would even promise not to do this. I mean, it seems like humans definitely deserve judgment and accountability. And we don't even deserve this kind of grace to actually be living. But it seems like God here has a promise and says, yeah, we will keep this thing going. I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to do that water flood thing again. And it says, then God blessed Noah. Again, grace, right? This is grace. It's not that Noah deserved it. It's not that anybody deserved it. It's that Noah found grace and his sons and told them, be fruitful and multiply. So we get back to that early command, be fruitful and multiply. Hey, have some intimacy with your wife, right? Produce some offspring. And it says, fill the earth, all the animals of the earth, all the birds of the sky, and the fresh and the small animals that scurry along the ground, and all the fish in the sea will look on you with fear and terror. I have placed them in your power, and I have given them to you for food, just as I have given you grain and vegetables. Interesting. The first mention of eating meat, I think, is right here in the Bible, right? Instead of just the vegetables, you see food, eat like animals. It says, but you must never eat any meat that still has the life blood in it, right? The blood is supposed to be not a part of it, right? You're not to take out the veins and be all eating the blood that's in the veins and get all into that kind of thing. No, there's something to be special used about this life blood. And it says, and I will require the blood of anyone who takes another person's life. If a wild animal kills a person, it must die. If anyone who murders a fellow human, he must die. It sounds like capital punishment right there kind of thing, right? And it says, and if anyone takes a human life, that person, I'm saying that again, that person's life will also be taken by human hands. Wow. So if anyone takes human life, that person's life will also be taken by human hands. For God made human beings in his own image. Now be fruitful and multiply and repopulate the earth. In his own image. So there is a image bearing, and that is to be respected and honored amongst human beings. We're not to be murdering one another. We're not to be taking someone's life with our own hands. And it makes it very clear that if you are into this, if you do this kind of murdering, then there is an accountability that you have with the Creator with doing this. And so we see an accountability with God. We see that that all human beings are made in the image of God, and they all have, if you will, inalienable rights. I don't know if I said that exactly right, but you've heard that before. We have rights that are given by God, not by any human government. Now, this I find fascinating because I grew up an atheist where the government kind of was your God. And what if the government says, hey, these people are good and these people are bad, and these people can live and these people can't live, and you can treat people this way and you can treat these people a different way, and you can do this and this is that, and this person gets this because of this, and this person gets that because of their skin color, and this person, because their eyes are this color, can do this, and this person with the eye color can do that. What if the government's doing all that? What if people are dictating who has the right and who doesn't have the right? What if the government says, hey, we are the ones who grant people the right, instead of understanding that God is the one who grants, is the one who's given these rights. You know, the right to live is something that's given by God. And you need to respect the other person's rights as someone who's made in the image of God. You know, that kind of idea. If we lose sight of that, which I certainly lost sight of that growing up, very progressive and atheistic, man, I just, like, why do you have a right to live? And why do I have a right to live? Who's to say who has a right to live? Who's to say who doesn't have a right to live? You know, oh, well, you know, it's just, you have a right to live because I say you have a right to live. That's all that I was thinking, you know. It's just whoever has the power, whoever has the Friedrich Nietzsche philosophy of power over anything. If you have the power over people, then you can dictate who has the right to do what. And God seems to say, hey, you know what? You can't take a human life. You can't just murder someone because they're made in the image of God. They have a right to live because they're made in the image of God. You know, do I value life like that? Do I value humanity like that? Or do I tend to look at humanity and want to murder and want to kill and want to take human life? Is my speech one where it has murder in it? It has hate in it, where I don't look at human beings as made in the image of God, but I look at them as people that should live just like I live, because I live so great and I have such a great mind that everybody's got to be like me. And if they're not like me, then I'm going to go get them. Then I'm going to attack them because they're not like me. That kind of thing. Yeah. Or am I that puffed up where I become like the Pharisees, where I use religion as a cloak to murder people? I use religion as a cloak to murder people. Do I use my philosophy? Do I use my education as a cloak to murder people? You can see what we do as human beings. We think we're righteous by our education, by our religion, by our philosophy, by us being instructed. And we use that to harm other people. And it says, then God told Noah and his sons, I hereby confirm my covenant with you and your descendants, and with all the animals that were on the boat, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, every living creature on earth. Yes, I am confirming my covenant with you. So this is a covenant with Noah. And again, there is something called covenant theology. You might want to look it up. And it says, never again will floodwaters kill all the living creatures. Never again will the flood destroy the earth. Okay, so we see the breakdown of this agreement between God and Noah and the birds and the thing and the wild animals and right? It's, hey, guys, I'm not going to destroy you all again, And it says, then God said, I'm giving you a sign of my covenant with you and with all living creatures for all generations to come. I have placed my rainbow in the clouds. It is a sign of my covenant with you and with all the earth. And when I send clouds over the earth, the rainbow will appear in the clouds. And I will remember my covenant with you and with all living creatures. Never again will the floodwaters destroy all life. When I see the rainbow in the clouds, I will remember the eternal covenant between God and every living creature on the earth. Then God said to Noah, yes, this rainbow is a sign of the covenant I am confirming with all the creatures of the earth. Wow, and what a covenant that it has been held to ever since this day, right? And it's kind of neat to see the rainbow and just think of that the rainbow is a sign of a covenant, an agreement. And it's an agreement of mercy. When you look at the rainbow, it's the idea of mercy. That's the idea. Not of pride or arrogance. The rainbow should not be a symbol of pride or arrogance or destruction or anything like that. The rainbow is a sign of mercy. Meaning it's something that should humble me as a human being when I think of the rainbow or when I see a rainbow. It should be something that says mercy, that I need mercy, man. That, man, something's wrong. I'm bent, Not, I'm the best. Man, I'm so filled with pride. It's amazing how prideful I am. I'm so prideful. I'm going to tell you how prideful I am. Man, everything I do is great. I'm so great. I'm great above all things. I'm that amazing. That's how prideful I am. It shouldn't be like that. It should be like, boy, man, we are a fragile group of people called humans. And boy, are we so messy. Like I said, we're like a ball that's kind of lopsided, that when we bounce, we kind of bounce all over the place. And it's amazing how even the rainbow, we can't seem to get right, right? We can't even figure out the rainbow. That's how bent we are, And it says, the sons of Noah who came out of the boat with their father were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham is the father of Canaan. From these people, 3 sons of Noah, came all the people who now populate the earth. Okay, so we all have, I guess our great, right, is Shem, Ham, our Japheth. Now we get a specific that Ham is the father of Canaan. Why? The land of Canaan. You might have heard of that. These are important factual parts of the Bible. Again, this doesn't read like a fairy tale. Noah's flood doesn't read like a fairy tale or anything like that. I like what Craig says. I'm way too humble to have pride, and I'm proud of that. That's funny. Yeah, these details are super specific, super cool. There's really cool stuff to study in here. And simply because, hey, you want to know your ancestry, everybody wants to know their ancestry, then you might want to read the Bible, right? You might want to get into it a little bit because that's your ancestry. Shem, Ham, or Japheth, where you come from. And it says, after the flood, Noah began to cultivate the ground, and he planted a vineyard. So now we see this thing called cultivation. So I kind of reference Genesis chapter 2, and you see that when it says before the land was cultivated, you can see what's being referenced there in now Genesis 2. It's a reference to this section as well, is that there was a time now where Noah began to cultivate the earth, right? Planting a vineyard. One day he drank some wine he had made. So this is just a fascinating event. Okay, so what does he do? He cultivates the ground. He plants a vineyard. And one day he drank some wine he had made, and he became drunk and lay naked inside his tent. So after the flood, Noah, starts cultivating the earth. Man, he has some grapes. He cultivates, a vineyard. And then he makes some wine. Now, I have a friend, John Shaw, who has a vineyard. And I was looking it up the other day, actually. Let me see if I can. It's Alma Sol Winery. ALMA. Alma, SOL Winery. Yeah, if I remember, this is out of California. But very cool. That an old friend, John, from high school, him and his wife have this vineyard. So he'd probably be a pro in telling us all about how wine is made. Man, that's really, really cool. And it says that Noah was a pro too. He got to be a pro anyway. Or maybe he wasn't so much a pro, right? Because it says one day he drank some wine he had made, and he became drunk and lay naked inside his tent. So he definitely had a few glasses. How strong was the wine? I don't know. How weak was the wine? I'm not sure. What did he fill up? What did he drink? Was he really thirsty? Did he just drink like a full 5 pints of it? I mean, what was he doing? Who knows? I don't know. And it says, Ham, the father of Canaan, saw that his father was naked and went outside and told his brothers. Then Shem, Ham, and Japheth took a robe, held it over their shoulders, and backed into the tent to cover their father. As they did this, they looked the other way so that they would not see him naked. And when Noah woke up from his stupor, he learned what Ham, his youngest son, had done. Then he cursed Canaan, the son of Ham. May Canaan be cursed. May he be the lowest of servants to his relatives. Then Noah said, May the Lord of God, the God of Shem, be blessed, and may Canaan be his servant. May God expand the territory of Japheth, and may Japheth share the prosperity of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. Then Noah lived another 350 years after the great flood, and he lived 950 years. Then he died. Now, again, you can go to enduringword.com and get more details on this. But I get a couple things here. One of them, just in our devotion, is Noah, shouldn't have got ripped, right? And I think that's one thing that we just always have to be aware of is, the Bible says to be sober-minded. Sober-minded. And what it's talking about is not just not getting tanked, but it's to being aware of what's going on. Sobriety. Sober-minded. Not staggering about in our life. But our life has purpose and meaning, right? There's intention. We know what we're doing. We're not just kind of, just going. Now, I've been drunk a lot. Growing up, since I was in elementary school, I drank. And unfortunately, I drank way too much as a little kid. And I drank with my parents as a little kid. Probably CPS would have got me if it was nowadays. But as I got a little older into junior high, I drank too much. And as I got into high school, I drank too much. And I would get drunk and throw up everywhere and wind up in some, I don't know, by a pool or my face on a couch somewhere, or, things like that. And so I know what it's like to stagger. I know what it's like to not be aware. I know what it's like to be in a fog. And man, that's a vulnerable place. And so Noah must have been very vulnerable because he was drunk. And man, it's no fun. Like, it's kind of a little freaky when you know you are vulnerable, when you have a little moment in your brain where you know you're vulnerable. And sometimes when you're drinking a lot, you get to a place where you realize that you're vulnerable, and then you're gone, right? And that's not good. And Ham seemed to exploit that. Now, I'm not sure how. I'm not sure how that looked in all of its detail. And we're not told exactly. But we see that the other two brothers seem to really understand their dad's vulnerability and wanted to cover it up, as Adam and Eve wanted to cover up their vulnerability. Maybe it's something that we see that there's a human condition that's being talked about here, or being shown here in this event. That there is an exploitation that now is a part of the human condition ever since the fall. That we aren't just ashamed of our own nakedness, but we tend to want to exploit, or we tend to want to tell stories. That's how we do it. We tell stories of other people's failures. Instead of love covering a multitude of sins, right? Love covering a multitude of sins. Covering Adam and Eve, covering Noah, the drunk incident here, covering his body, right? We tend to exploit, right? Let's exploit everybody's sin. Let's exploit everybody's frailty. Let's exploit. Why do we do this as human beings? Because there's something to it, meaning we get an actual enjoyment. Oh, it's gross. We get an actual enjoyment in seeing failure. This is just a nasty, nasty part of us as human beings. That we love to watch a reality show where people are going to bail, and they're going to fail, and they're going to do things that are shameful, and they will be exploited by the networks, by us, everybody, all exploiting. We don't want to cover a multitude of sin. We don't want to be quiet. Instead, we want to get with our family members and talk about people. Why? Because we like to. There's something fun about talking about other people and how bad they are and what they do and everything like that. Instead of maybe just saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, they're doing this, but let's pray for them. Let's just pray for them. Let's seek the Lord for them. Let's intercede for them. That kind of idea. Instead, Ham, man, there was some kind of exploitation there, right? Where he was just like, there's my dad naked, there's my dad vulnerable. And instead of just doing the respectful thing and covering up his dad, right? He, man, sees it all, and then he goes in and tells his brothers, hey, dude, guess what I just saw? Yeah. Isn't that how we are? Hey, guess what? Guess what? Hey, when you're at church, are you just exploiting other people? Are you just talking about other people to people? Do you really have love that wants to cover a multitude of sins? Or are you wanting to exploit one another? Or do you want to, like Paul says, lifting each other up? or do we just want to tear down? So I see a really important event here of, man, am I like Ham? Is that Beau? And if I get honest, I go, ooh, I see that in me. Love covers a multitude of sins. Boy, what a great passage. And then it says, let's see. And then we already read the end, but we saw that there's something about this Canaan fella, this descent of Ham, and that he will be a servant. Now, it's always interesting to see the land of Canaan, that they will be a servant of the other brothers. They will want to be the lead, but they won't be the lead, right? They will be servant to the brothers. Interesting. Israel. The land of Canaan. Israel. Right? The different people in this area. Do we have issues today about this? Are people talking about this even in our day? The people of Israel, should they be in the land? Whose land is this? Who should be the leaders in the land? Who is really the leaders in the land? Who are the servants in the land, etc., etc.? It's kind of interesting how this seems to still be going on today. Thousands and thousands and thousands of years later. Maybe what we're seeing today is something that, is something that was spoken of years ago. That God, who lives outside of time, matter, and space, already has prophesied how things are going to go with the people in this area and their descendants. And here we are just seeing it played out. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4. And one day the play is going to end and the composer will come out on the stage, take a bow, and say, the end. Interesting. Well, that is the Devo for today. Genesis 8 and 9 in the books. And boy, there's some things for me to work on in my own life, right? How am I going to treat other people? Big question. Okay, and just remembering the goodness of God, that God remembers that he is a God that is very involved and relational, and drawing close to God, dedicating my life to God. What does that mean to dedicate my life to God? So very cool stuff to think about in the day, right? Giving my life. What does that mean to give my life to family, to friends? Man, very cool stuff. Okay, so we understand that from the Bible, we get a lot of our own vernacular. The way we talk, the way we think, it certainly is coming from this book. This is definitely relatable to us. Very cool. It's relevant, makes sense. We'll talk to you guys later. Have a great day, okay? Thanks, Paula, for always the encouragement. We'll see you later, Laura. See you later, Craig. See you later, my friends, Patty, Tina, the crew, Mike. You guys have a good one. Bye-bye.